My father used to say that numbers were the only language that mattered. He said it at the dinner table. He said it at my brother's baseball games. He said it the first time I brought home a report card with straight A's, and he looked at it like it was a grocery list. Numbers build things, he'd say. Everything else is just noise. He was an engineer. Civil, the kind who builds bridges and overpasses and drainage systems that nobody thinks about until they stop working. He spent 31 years at the same firm in Columbus, Ohio, and he was proud of that. Proud of the concrete. Proud of the permanence. I grew up drawing. Not doodling in the margins of notebooks, I mean really drawing. Portraits, architectural sketches, fashion illustrations, anything I could put on paper. By the time I was 14, I was filling sketchbooks the way other kids filled journals. By 16, I had a small online following. By 17, I'd sold 3 original pieces to people I'd never met, strangers who found me through a blog I ran after school on the family desktop. My father thought it was a hobby, the harmless kind you tolerate in children until they grow out of it. He never asked to see my work. Not once. I remember the exact moment I understood that. I was a sophomore in high school, sitting at the kitchen table with a finished watercolor piece in front of me. It had taken me 11 days. A woman's profile, half her face dissolving into birds. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever made. My mother walked by and said it was beautiful. My brother said it was sick in the way teenagers mean a compliment. My father walked through the kitchen twice, refilled his coffee both times, and never looked down. I didn't say anything, I just picked it up, rolled it carefully, and took it to my room. That was the year I started applying to art programs. I didn't tell him until the acceptance letter came. I got into the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD. Full review, merit scholarship consideration, the real thing. I was shaking when I opened the email. My mother hugged me so hard she knocked my chair back. My brother yelled from the other room when I told him. My father asked how much it cost. I said the scholarship would cover a significant portion and I was applying for additional grants. He put down his fork. We were at dinner, and I'd chosen that moment deliberately, thinking the table would be neutral ground. And he looked at me in that way he had. Not unkind exactly, just completely certain. An art degree, he said. It wasn't a question. Illustration and design, I said. There's real industry demand for. For what? Drawing pictures? He said it quietly. That was always worse than yelling. Olivia, you're a smart girl. You could do anything. Engineering, medicine, law, and you want to spend 4 years learning to draw? I already know how to draw, I said. I want to learn the business of it. He shook his head. Just once. The way you shake your head at a child who says they want to be an astronaut and you don't have the heart to explain orbital mechanics. You'll figure it out eventually, he said, and picked his fork back up. I went to RISD. I paid for it with the merit scholarship, 2 outside grants, a work-study position in the campus print lab, and a student loan I am still paying off. My father did not contribute. Not because he couldn't. He could have, comfortably, but because he said he wasn't going to fund something he didn't believe in. Those words sat in me for a long time. I didn't let them fester. I just kept them somewhere small and quiet, like a stone in your shoe that you eventually stop feeling because you've walked so far it's just part of the terrain. College was hard in the way I expected and hard in ways I didn't. The program was rigorous, 14-hour studio days. Critiques that stripped your work down to nothing and asked you to rebuild it from the structure up. I learned things I didn't have words for. Color theory that went so deep it changed how I saw traffic lights in grocery stores. Typography that made me understand why certain things felt trustworthy and others felt cheap. Composition principles that I started seeing in movie frames and street corners and the way light hit my dorm room window at 6 in the morning. I also learned to build a freelance practice from scratch. That part wasn't in the curriculum, not really. I pieced it together myself. Between my junior and senior years, I was running a small design business on the side, book covers mostly, a few editorial illustrations for online magazines, naga work for local businesses, nothing glamorous. But I was earning, and more importantly, I was learning to price my work, manage clients, negotiate, deliver under deadline. The things that turn skill into income. I graduated with my portfolio, my debt, and no safety net. My father called to congratulate me. It was a short call. He asked if I had a job lined up. I said I was building my freelance practice. There was a pause on the line that lasted long enough for me to hear him recalibrate. "Let me know if you need help," he said finally. And he meant it, I think, just not in any way that would cost him his opinion. The first 2 years out of school were the leaning years. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Providence with a roommate I found on Craigslist and a secondhand desk that wobbled unless you put a matchbook under the left leg. I tracked every dollar. I had a spreadsheet, still have it actually, where I logged every project, every payment, every expense. There were months where the math was frightening. There were months where it wasn't. I kept drawing. I built a following slowly, the real kind. The kind that grows because people share your work with other people and those people stay. I started getting better clients. A children's book illustration deal. Small advance, but it was real. A real publisher with real distribution. An editorial contract with a regional magazine that turned into a recurring relationship. A corporate client in the healthcare sector who needed infographics, which turned into a full brand identity project. The year I turned 28, something shifted. I got a cold email from a woman named, well, I'm going to call her the creative director, because that's what matters about her. The creative director of a publishing house based in New York. Not a huge house, but an old and respected one. She'd seen a book cover I'd designed that had made some rounds online. A particular piece where I'd done something with layered type and negative space that apparently caught her attention. She wanted to talk. I took the call on a Tuesday afternoon sitting on my wobbling desk. She asked about my process. She asked about my rates. She asked if I'd be interested in a larger engagement, not just one cover, but a series. A rebranding of their entire visual identity for a flagship literary imprint. A significant project. I said yes. We negotiated. I held my number even when she pushed. I'd learned by then to hold my number. That project took 8 months. It was the most complex, demanding, creatively satisfying work I'd done to that point. I was collaborating with editors and authors and marketers, traveling to New York twice for in-person presentations, managing a scope that kept expanding in ways I had to document and charge for properly. When it was finished, the creative director sent me a note that said simply, "This is the best rebrand we've done in 20 years. I stared at that sentence for a while. I didn't call my father to tell him. That wasn't the moment. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet, and I knew he wouldn't understand what it meant the way I needed him to. Then the award came. The American Illustration Annual. It's an industry recognition, the kind that matters to people inside the field, which is exactly the kind that matters because the people inside the field are the ones who hire you. They selected 3 pieces from the publisher project. There was a gala in New York, actual ceremony, actual room full of people I'd admired from a distance, actual engraved recognition. I bought a dress. I went. My parents came with me. My mother had asked to come the moment I told her, and I'd said yes without hesitating. My father said he'd come too, which surprised me. He'd taken a day off work for it. That surprised me more. The venue was in Midtown. A tall room with good lighting and people who talked with their hands, the way creative people do. My mother kept squeezing my arm. My father stood next to her in his good suit, the one he wore to professional functions, and he looked around the room with an expression I couldn't quite read. I think he was trying to understand it, the world of it, who these people were, what this room meant. The ceremony moved quickly. Categories, names, brief remarks from the awardees. When they called mine, the piece from the imprint project, the one that had taken me longest and cost me the most sleep, I walked up to the front of that room and I took the award from the hands of someone whose work had hung in museum collections. I said a few words. I thanked my mother. I thanked the creative director and her team. I thanked my RISD professors. I did not thank my father. He knew why, I think. Or maybe he didn't. That was between us. But here is what happened when I walked back to where they were standing. My father, this man who had built bridges, who had spent his whole life believing that things only matter if you can measure their weight, who had never once come to see my work, who had looked through me at that kitchen table when I was 16, holding something I'd poured myself into for 11 days. My father stood up straighter when I approached. Not quite attention, but something close. He took the award from my hands when I offered it, the way I'd seen him hold blueprints, carefully, both hands. He turned it over. He read what was on it. He looked up at me. And he said, "I didn't know it was like this." 6 words. I didn't know it was like this. Not an apology. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't an apology, and I didn't need it to be. It was something more specific than an apology and maybe more true. It was a man who had built his entire understanding of the world around measurable things, finally standing inside something he hadn't measured and admitting that he hadn't understood its dimensions. I didn't cry. I was surprised by that. I'd imagined this kind of moment before, the way you do when you've been carrying something for a long time. You imagine falling apart, or feeling triumphant, or saying the perfect thing that closes the wound cleanly. I just nodded. "I know," I said. My mother was crying. She's the kind of person who cries at everything beautiful, and she'd been doing it quietly for the last 10 minutes. My father handed the award back to me, and for a moment his hand was still on it, and mine was too, and we both held it at the same time. Then he let go. We went to dinner after, the 3 of us, at a place my mother picked near the venue. My father asked questions I'd never heard from him before, about the project, about the publishing house, about how the illustration process worked, about what brand identity actually meant in practice. Not dismissive questions, real ones, the kind that meant he was trying to build a new map. I answered all of them. I didn't volunteer the history of everything he'd missed. Einrad didn't bring up the scholarship, or the loan, or the years of eating beans and rice twice a week to keep the math from tipping over. I didn't say, "You could have come to RISD graduation." Einrad didn't say, "I stopped calling you about my work because it was too expensive to keep handing someone a piece of yourself and watching them set it aside without looking." I didn't say any of that, not because I've forgiven him completely. Forgiveness is more complicated than a dinner in 6 words, and I think anyone who's ever carried something like this knows that. But because that dinner wasn't the place, and more than that, because I'd realized something somewhere between the podium and our table. I hadn't needed his belief to become what I became. That sounds simpler than it was. I want to be precise about it, because it matters. I'm not saying his doubt didn't hurt. It did. It still does, in the particular way that a parent's indifference to something you love leaves a specific kind of bruise. I'm not saying the lack of his support didn't cost me. It cost me money and sleep and years of second-guessing myself at 2 in the morning when the freelance math was bad and I had nobody in my corner who had any faith in the direction I'd chosen. What I'm saying is that somewhere along the way, I built the belief myself. Out of sketchbooks and cold emails and held rates in bad months, survived and good months earned, and the kind of stubbornness that looks like confidence from the outside but is really just the refusal to stop. I'd built it piece by piece, the way my father built bridges actually, not all at once but one load-bearing element at a time, each one tested before you add the next. I thought about telling him that. I decided to keep it for myself. The drive back to Columbus was long. My parents drove. I sat in the back with the award in my lap and the city falling away behind us. My mother fell asleep in the passenger seat around midnight, her head tipped toward the window. My father drove the way he always did, both hands on the wheel, steady. About an hour outside the city, he said, without looking away from the road, "I should have looked at your drawings." Just that. I didn't answer right away. I watched the highway lights move over the windshield. I thought about the watercolor on the kitchen table, the woman dissolving into birds, 11 days of work that he'd walked past twice. "Yeah," I said, "you should have." He nodded once, both hands still on the wheel. We didn't say anything else until we got home. I've thought about that night a lot in the time since. Not obsessively, not in the way of someone rehearsing a grievance, more the way you return to a place where something significant happened and try to understand it better with new light. Here's what I keep coming back to. The work was always real. The award, the creative director's note, the rebrand that took 8 months, none of it was real because my father finally saw it. It was real long before that room. It was real when I was sitting at the wobbling desk at 2 in the morning trying to make a deadline. Real when I held my rate and the client eventually said yes. Real when the first check from a real publisher cleared my account and I transferred $100 immediately into savings, because that's what you do when every dollar is hard-earned and you learn to treat it that way. The ceremony didn't make it real. It just made it visible to someone who'd been looking the wrong way. I'm 31 now. The loan is almost paid off. I ran the numbers last month, 14 more payments. My freelance practice became a small studio. I have 2 people who work with me part-time, a designer and a project coordinator, and I'm in conversations about a third. The imprint project led to 3 more clients in the publishing sector, and those led elsewhere, the way good work tends to when you let it move. My father and I talk more than we used to. Not about everything. Not about the years where we existed mostly in parallel, occupying the same family without quite occupying the same understanding. But more. He texted me a photo last month of a bridge he'd worked on years ago. It made the local news because they were doing maintenance and he'd spotted his name in the project credits. He seemed happy about it. Proud. I texted back, "That's really cool, Dad. I mean it." He sent a thumbs up. Then, a minute later, "Saw your new book cover online, the one with the red." I put my phone down and looked at my ceiling for a moment. "Thank you," I wrote back. He didn't reply. But that was okay. Some things don't come with a receipt. They don't come with the right words at the right time, or the early support that would have made the road shorter, or the moment where the person who doubted you admits cleanly and without ambiguity that they were wrong. Some things come later, sideways in a text about a book cover sent by a man who spent his whole life believing only in the weight of concrete. It's not everything I wanted, but it's something I didn't expect, which maybe makes it worth more. I still have that watercolor. The woman dissolving into birds. It's framed now, in my studio. The first thing you see when you walk in. Nobody asked me why that one. I like it that way. I've been asked a few times, mostly by younger people, designers just starting out, whether I think my father's doubt made me stronger. Like it was a gift in disguise. I never know how to answer that honestly without sounding either bitter or falsely gracious, so I usually just say, "I don't think it worked that way. Here's what I actually believe. The doubt didn't make me. I made me." And the distinction matters more than people want to admit, because we have this tendency to reframe the people who failed us as secret architects of our success, like we need to give them credit just to make the story feel tidy. My father withheld his support and I built something anyway. Those are 2 separate facts. The second one doesn't redeem the first. But here's the other thing I believe, and this part is harder to say cleanly, the version of me who walked up to receive that award, who held her rate in a negotiation, who transferred $100 into savings the moment a check cleared because she learned to treat every dollar as something earned rather than something owed. That person was built choice by choice in the absence of the thing I wanted most. And I think there's something true in that. Not something romantic, something more like physics. When you don't have a foundation handed to you, you learn to pour your own. It sets differently. It sets harder. My father said, "I didn't know it was like this." 6 words. And I've turned them over so many times since that night, looking at them from different angles. What I keep landing on is this. He wasn't lying. He genuinely didn't know. He had built his whole understanding of worth around things you could measure and verify. Load-bearing capacity, tensile strength, a salary you could print on paper. My work didn't fit that system. And instead of expanding his system, he dismissed what didn't fit. That's not cruelty. It's a failure of curiosity, and I think failures of curiosity over time cost us more than we ever calculate. I'm not saying that to excuse him. I'm saying it because I'd caught myself doing the same thing in smaller ways, assuming I understood something before I'd really looked at it, closing a door before I'd checked what was on the other side. My father's blind spot was large, and it had a cost. Mine might be smaller, but it exists. That's the thing about watching someone else's mistake up close for years. If you're paying attention, you start to see the shape of it in yourself. What I carried out of that room in Midtown wasn't just the award. It was a cleaner version of something I'd been working on for years. The understanding that no one gets to decide the value of your work except the work itself, and the people willing to look at it honestly. My father came late to looking. The creative director looked the moment she saw that cover. Both of them saw the same thing. Only one of them had to be surprised by it. I still draw. Every day, usually in the morning before the studio fills up, just for myself. Nothing that goes anywhere. Just the practice of making something true. That's the whole story, really. Make something true. Keep making it. Eventually, the room catches up.